Okay, at this time, we are going to recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the U.S. Highway 1792 Community Redevelopment Agency. And we have one item on the agenda today for the CRA, I believe, just one item, yes. Presentation by Ms. Setzer.
Yes, thank you. For the record, Tricia Setzer, Chief Administrator of the Office of Economic Development and Community Relations. This item considers a U.S. Highway 1792 CRA redevelopment and construction grant. The CRA may consider approval of a redevelopment and construction grant to 1792 Five Points LLC in the amount of $740,000 for demolition only of the former Flea World site located at 4311 South U.S. Highway 1792, Sanford, Florida. Or the CRA may consider approval of a redevelopment and construction grant to 1792 Five Points LLC in the amount of $1,380,039 for both demolition and utility connections necessary in preparation of redevelopment of the site. Or the CRA may deny approval of a redevelopment and construction grant to 1792 Five Points LLC for preparation of the redevelopment of the former Flea World site. For the benefit of those viewers and in attendance, the U.S. 1792 Community Redevelopment Area was established in 1997 under Florida law, which permits local governments to designate areas as CRAs to encourage investment and job creation in blighted urban areas. There are more than 220 active community redevelopment areas in the state of Florida, several of which are in Central Florida. The purpose of the U.S. 1792 CRA is to revitalize one of Seminole County's major thoroughfares. The program is guided by a series of redevelopment plans specific to the corridor, which were adopted by Seminole County government and the participating cities of the CRA, Castleberry, Lake Mary, Sanford, and Winter Springs. A CRA utilizes tax increment financing to fund redevelopment within that CRA. Essentially, future increases in tax revenue above an established base level are set aside to fund redevelopment projects within that district. A CRA does not require the creation of additional taxes or fees. Any funds received from tax increment financing area must be used for specific redevelopment purposes within that targeted district and not for general government purposes. Since its inception, the value of this CRA property has essentially doubled from $247 million to $247,752,570 to $520,728,485. The Reagan Center project proposes utilization of both public and private funds for the purposes of rehabilitating the former Flea World site. The project meets CRA criteria as it eliminates blight along the corridor, creates a more viable economy with increased job opportunities and a wider range of goods and services, and increases the opportunities for private investors to participate in community redevelopment efforts. The applicant estimates that the redevelopment will create more than 1,000 new jobs and ultimately involve close to $140 million in capital investment. The project applicant intends to invest more than $4.6 million for site development and has requested $1.38 million from the CRA, which would support demolition of existing structures and installation of utilities. The Reagan Center project was approved for funding by the Redevelopment Planning Agency in May 2016 in the amount of $1,380,039. Staff believes that demolition of the existing structures on the site provides a clear public benefit through the reduction of blight along the corridor. Additionally, the demolition activities will contribute to the accomplishment of the longer-range site redevelopment goals. As such, staff recommends that the CRA award 100% of the site demolition costs. Therefore, I'm seeking approval of the redevelopment and construction grant to 1792 Five Points LLC in the amount of $740,000 for demolition needed in preparation for the redevelopment of the former Flea World site located at 4311 South U.S. Highway 1792 to be awarded on a phased basis as detailed in the grant agreement. I'm happy to address your questions.
Any questions for staff? No questions for staff? Okay. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Would the applicant care to make a presentation? No. Okay. All right. At this particular time, has any member of the public signed up to make a comment on this?
Yes, sir. I have David Levitt, followed by Donald Menzel.
Okay. Mr. Levitt?
David Levitt, 1000 Ridge Point Cove in Longwood, unincorporated Seminole County. I usually come to these meetings to speak out against taxpayer money going to companies for things other than goods or services back to the taxpayer. It's a very simple concept. You've heard all the reasons before why it's not right. Giving one company money over another company, making unfair competition, and so on and so on. I want to concentrate today on the application that I read that was online. It's almost 2 years old. I think next month or the month after, it'll be a 2-year-old application that you're still discussing. On that application that I read, it actually claimed over 2,500 jobs. The lady that just spoke said it was 1,000 jobs, but the application said 2,500 jobs. I did a little research, and according to industry standard, and I'll be glad to provide that standard to you, there's actually going to be about 1,000 jobs less than that if they even put those buildings and those businesses in that location, which is another thing that's puzzling to me, is that we don't even know if there's going to be anything built there yet. What we're doing is paying somebody to go in and demolish a place that's already been demolished, by the way, and their application shows possible businesses. Do they actually have any signed contracts with any restaurants or anything like that that's supposedly going to go in there? The restaurants, I believe, they claim that there are 125 full-time jobs. And I read it very carefully because at first I thought, well, when they said 125 jobs per restaurant, I thought, well, maybe they meant part-time. Because most restaurants, sit-in restaurants, dine-in restaurants, they have mostly part-time people. It's not unusual to have 100 part-time employees in a restaurant the size of a Smoky Bones, say. But not 100 full-time, and they're claiming 125 full-time. The reality is it's the full-time equivalent of a restaurant that size is about 55 employees. So I urge you to look at all of the other details in there, do some research like I've done, and see if there's other areas where there's possible exaggerations going on. So, and to close, property values doubled since the CRA, the young lady talked about in that corridor. Well, geez, they've doubled everywhere since that. So it wasn't because of the CRA. All right, so the CRA has been around for a long time. So property values have gone up significantly everywhere, and it's not because of a CRA. So again, just to reiterate, taxpayer money should only go to corporations and companies that provide goods or services back to the taxpayer. End of story. Thank you.
Mr. Donald Menzel, followed by Bill Hyde.
Good morning, County Commission. My name is Donald Menzel. My address is 270 East Bahama Road, Winter Springs, Florida. And I've done a lot of reaching out to citizens here in the last couple of weeks, and this issue has come up time and time again. The perception that this CRA is going to take care of blighted areas, well defined within the rules of that's set forth within the CRA, the perception of a blighted area and the way that these monies are to be spent doesn't kind of match up with this particular spend. Within speaking to a lot of constituents, I got an air of a majority, I'd say 99% of the people did not want to see this handout to happen. From my understanding, I got clarity this morning. I was under the understanding that the money would go back to the general funds if it was not dispersed or earmarked, and that was not the right assessment of the situation. I got clarity this morning that would actually be refunded in a pro rata basis back to whoever paid into it. So I would encourage this board to truly consider allowing this to sunset. Was that incorrect?
That's not true.
Just let him finish his comments.
Even if that isn't true, I would encourage this board, from my experience so far, allowing this to sunset and the funds to either A, go back to general funds, or B, go back to the citizens that paid into it, versus moving forward with earmarking it for this particular company. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Bill Hyde, followed by Sean Coons.
Good morning, members of the commission. My name is Bill Hyde. I live at 2379 Audley Street in unincorporated Seminole County. I'm here in opposition, like a lot of my friends and neighbors. I don't have a lot of the facts and figures, but I recall very clearly that I was here the last time you guys were considering this, and you kind of treated it like it was a bucket of fish that your neighbor brought to you that had been around for a day or so, and you weren't real sure what to do with it. So you put it in the refrigerator. And guess what? The refrigerator's open and the fish don't smell any better. This is just not a good idea to be giving taxpayers' money out in preference of one company over another. I agree 100% with what Mr. Levitt said on that, because it elevates somebody who is obviously going to make a whole lot of millions of dollars over people who, might be just trying to start out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde.
Sean Coons, followed by Matt Collins.
Sean Coons, 670 Venture Court, Winter Springs, 32708. Thank you for your time, commissioners, residents. I'm an interested citizen of the county as an entrepreneur, a father, and a teacher. Also, Lyman High graduate of '93. Hello, Mr. Henley. Thank you to all the Purple Heart veterans. Also, a son of a war-injured Vietnam veteran medic, non-Purple Heart awardee, though. City by city, right now, there's a current struggle to maintain the free markets without overregulation, to encourage entrepreneurship, advance the principles of liberty. And deals like the one you're considering right now just reek of cronyism and only advances the notion that that's how big business gets done. Seminole County is a prosperous and still very natural county with lots of wild wonder, if I may use that term. And a lot of that is kudos to you guys. Let's keep the reputation that way. And instead, as was eloquently put, by giving into the capricious whims of an overreaching council. Not too long ago, pardon me, I'm getting emotional on this part. Not too long ago, the school I co-founded tried to get a zoning exemption just a mile from the former Flea World. We were flat out denied, despite having all the proper paperwork, even being guided by a member of the zoning commission, and having the blessing of all of our would-be neighbors. That flat denial of small business trying to survive and meet its needs while taking money and then creating financial incentive for big business doesn't bode well for people seeking re-election. Now, I know these are slightly separate issues, zoning exemptions versus development, but we're talking about small business needs versus big business needs and your apparent tendency to meet the latter while ignoring the former. That's how it's going to look to dozens of family employees as well as other small business entrepreneurs who have to jump through hoops without the luxury of being able to contribute to campaigns first. What we're asking is not a lot. We're literally asking you to do almost nothing. If a homeowner finds a lot they're interested in, they're fully responsible, beginning to end, to develop that lot. If you would like to sweeten the deal and try to attract a developer to come and create jobs in the area, and it is a sweet area, although Fun World was getting dangerous, I suggest getting completely out of the way. Reduce restrictions, reduce intrusive regulations, keep business and employment-related taxes low, and better yet, don't penalize success in any way. Allow for more zoning exemptions, and so small businesses can get started. It's a free market solution that doesn't require backroom deals and even keeps campaign contributions, however legal and transparent, above board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Collins, followed by Elizabeth Bookspan.
Good morning. My name is Matt Collins. I reside at 1733 Willis Circle in non-incorporated Seminole County. I am the executive director of the Seminole Committee for Government Accountability. I'll be brief. In case you haven't figured it out, I am here to oppose A370017, known as the Flea World handout. Now, I only had a few days, but I was able to get a few hundred petitions against this particular measure. If you extrapolate that out, I would say that given more time, we would have had thousands, possibly tens of thousands of petitions. I'll leave these with the clerk now. Now, government should not be in the business of corporate welfare, especially with our tax dollars, and government should not be picking winners and losers. Now, there are some potential conflicts of interest in this deal that I believe most of us are familiar with, and I will leave that at that there. Now, as a side note, our organization would like to see the CRA expire and have those funds returned to wherever they need to be. Again, I ask that you vote against this fleecing of the taxpayers and vote no on the Flea World handout. Thank you.
Followed by H. Alexander Duncan.
My name's Elizabeth Bookspan. I live at 239 Timberland Avenue in Longwood, unincorporated Seminole County, Carlton Henley's district. So you've already heard, I support many of the statements that have already been made about the sunsetting of the redevelopment agency as well as government's proper role. So I just want to expand a little bit about that. When I heard about this issue, it reminded me that my husband and I moved here from San Francisco, California about 9 years ago because Florida had so many wonderful memories for us when we had lived here previously, and it's a very affordable place to live, and we really appreciate that. That's so important. We could raise a family here in more than 1,000 square feet because we were coming from the West Coast. We appreciated the position of government and the understanding that government has a role to play. It is supposed to establish and enforce laws to ensure that markets are as honest and competitive as we can make them. No force, no fraud, no child labor, etc. In the long run, competition, along with the fear of failure and bankruptcy, is the most reliable regulator of our economic life. Firms can only succeed at serving customers when they have honest profit and loss signals. Assisting with public money only distorts these economic signals and causes great losses to the entire community. Government needs to be a cop, not a player in markets. It's impossible to be both. It needs to refrain from making laws and regulations that actually interfere with and undermine honest competition, something which is happening constantly today. Subsidies to friends, government-enforced monopolies, and price controls destabilize markets and lead to mass unemployment. I live across the street from a Seminole County firefighter, and he reminds me that although you guys granted money to give them new equipment, that equipment's breaking down and they don't have the maintenance personnel to fix it. I don't know all the details around the regulations on this money, and you have to spend it somewhere. Please don't do another Crane's Roost. But consider giving that money into existing Seminole County services that really need it. Thank you very much.
H. Alexander Duncan, followed by J. Jury.
H. Alexander Duncan, P.O. Box 62009, Vito, Florida. Hey, Grant, Lee, this is basically for the rest of y'all. I sat right here in February and said we'd be right back here this year for y'all to give Randy and Sid the money. See, so we're going to cut to the chase. Everybody touching on it. They know that you go on Mike's website, we can see who give you the legal money for your campaigns, and then we go through these agendas and we see who y'all get the money back to. That's just honest, and it's our money. And y'all are all supposed to be fiscal conservative Republicans, but you got all these citizen Republicans coming up here kind of telling you how to be real fiscal conservative Republicans. You're picking the big guys over the little guys. And eventually, it all comes home, So, Mr. Haran, Mr. Henley, it's not nothing you guys got to worry about. You're out of here, right? But at the end of the day...
Okay, Mr.
No, I'm saying you announced that you're not seeking re-election.
Rather than personal attacks.
No, this ain't personal.
Please, excuse me, sir. Please limit your comments.
I'm limiting my comments.
To facts.
These are facts.
Relative to.
And these are relevant. They are relevant. So please. You see, you tried to do that with Rocky last time. Check a citizen. See, I don't invest my heart in believing in what you guys are selling on the campaign trail. That's why I already know. If you follow me on Facebook, Mr. Haran, I talk about all you guys all the time in these type of deals. People only really come in when it's really hammered home by people like Mr. Levitt or the little committee group for accountability. But it's been going on, all of you guys been up here the whole time. And it's going to continue going on. So at the end of the day, all these people are asking for this one time. Tell your donors no. That's it. It's real simple. Now, you can take it as a personal attack or not, but at the end of the day, this is taxpayer money that they keep seeing go to big businesses like Bill Ray Nissan, okay? For real? Y'all said that was blighted. That's right there in Spring Hammock. When I was a kid, you could bottle spring water in Spring Hammock. You know what you guys have done in Spring Hammock? Spread the word out so far. Y'all closed that well. See, so when people talk about this is Florida's natural county, no, you used to could fish off of Redbug Lake Road. You know what you did to Redbug Lake Road? Just spread it out and put a dentist's office right where my daddy used to take us fishing. See, like the dude came in and said earlier, 70% of the people in the state are not from the state. But the people who are from here, born and raised in Seminole County like myself, okay, who could go to the river and swim with the manatees and all that before you guys got into all this big business development stuff, when Chuleota used to really be Chuleota and be a real area. See, all that comes together. Y'all can try to separate it, but it all comes back together. And right now, all these people are here because they're tired of you giving your money away, their money away, to the big guys.
Next we have Jay Jury, followed by Shane Malloy.
Good morning, Commissioners, Clerk Malloy, Manager Guillet. My name is Jay Jury, and a very brief moment of personal privilege. My father, who passed away 7.5 years ago, was a frontline combat infantry veteran of the Pacific Theater in World War II. He took 2 Japanese bullets in the Battle of New Georgia, and for that reason was awarded a Purple Heart, so I appreciate your act this morning with regard to the Purple Heart veterans. Speaking now to the issue at hand, that of the subsidy for the redevelopment of the former Flea World site. I come from the opposite end of the political spectrum of Mr. Levitt, and some of us have objections to this basically proposed giveaway as well. The kinds of objections I represent have to do with the unmet needs of Seminole County. I do not believe the county should be in the business of giving away tax dollars to large private sector interests when we have so many unmet needs. I'll only give you the one most graphic example, perhaps. I'm sure you all remember the 60 Minutes episode on homelessness in Seminole County. And I'm aware that you're doing things about some of these problems, but I would argue, or I would contend, I don't believe that you're doing enough. And when you have money like this to give away, to me it's fairly graphic evidence that the priorities are misplaced in this county, and they seriously need to be redressed. And I want to link that to the whole issue of the CRA. The staff person spoke this morning and talked about tax increment financing being the mechanism that's used. I was around in the day and the time when the mechanism was created, and it was always understood to be a rob Peter to pay Paul type of scheme. She mentioned quite correctly that the revenues do not flow back to the general budget. Well, that's exactly the problem. What winds up happening with tax increment financing and why it is so wrong is because the rest of the taxpayers outside of the CRA district wind up subsidizing the services that still need to be provided to that district. So beyond voting down the proposal this morning to fund this redevelopment, I would also ask and urge you to begin the process of getting rid of the CRA mechanism altogether. There are far better ways to obtain the kind of objectives, the sort of outcomes that we want in this county, rather than this kind of rob Peter to pay Paul type of scheme. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Shane Malloy.
Hello, Commissioners. Shane Malloy, 1617 Chilean Lane, Winter Park, Florida, 32792. Not sure if it's in Utilities or Castleberry. I'm not sure if I'm unincorporated. I think I am. I'm not happy, and that's why I'm here today. When I helped found the Committee for Government Accountability, my goal was simple, was to provide citizens with a way of getting updates on local government that they do not often get unless they're able to make 9:30 meetings this morning. Our goal is not to be a fake news site or push agendas, but to report facts and be a trustworthy organization for the citizens of Seminole County, and I hope to work with citizens and be that. As I said, I'm not happy, and I'm here today, like many others, sacrificing time from work so that I can be here to say, end this handout and end the CRA. Government should not at any level pick winners and losers. This area of 1792, as we're very familiar with, would be developed either way. I can't even begin to understand the concept that we need to hand people money in order for them to take a piece of land like that is so valuable in such a huge corridor and turn it into a for-profit business in the free market. It's astounding to me that you guys would also be the same board that, from rumors that I hear, would be talking about future tax increases, albeit a property tax or an impact fee adjustment. These are the exact pieces of waste we can cut to prevent those types of increases from having to happen. A county that focused, when I started the committee, the goal was to make a group that would be focused on a county that focuses on services to taxpayers and citizens, not handouts to politically connected insiders. And I might add also, and this is not for today's discussion, but in the committee's work to try to get public records and things, we've been hit with all kinds of outrageous attorney's fees to even get information. So this is not an easy board to get information from, even simple things like people's emails. Thank you.
There was also a comment form from a Natalie Lackner, who is also against the item, opposes the item. Okay. Does the applicant have anything to say with? Okay. Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing and throw it open to the board. Commissioner Carey.
Mr. Chairman, it's unfortunate that people create organizations and they try to hide behind them with the title of government watchdog, and they put out information on social media and other things to try to collect petitions based on incorrect information. So earlier this morning, Ms. Setzer went through and talked about the CRA, how it was created, why it was created, where the funding comes from, and apparently not everybody understands how this actually works. So if we could ask Ms. Guillet to, again, explain this, where the funding comes from in the CRA, because it comes from the people that own the property in the CRA. It's the incremental finance from the time the CRA was created. I think it's interesting that Mr. Malloy thought that was, young Mr. Malloy thought that was a bad idea when his dad was on the board when it was actually created. So, Ms. Guillet, could you just comment on those particular items for us?
Mrs. Perry, two of us identified ourselves as being part of the committee, so your comment as far as
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Excuse me, point of order. We've closed the
He
public
had his
hearing.
3 minutes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll build on what Tricia mentioned earlier about the CRA. A CRA is a fixed geographic area in which the purpose is to provide a funding mechanism to eliminate blight and to encourage redevelopment in that area. And it's sort of a self-funding redevelopment endeavor in that the geographic area that's identified to be the recipient of the redevelopment activity and the removal of blight provides the funding for those activities. And the way that the redevelopment trust fund is established is that the baseline of taxable value within that fixed geographic area is the beginning of the establishment of the increment financing. So every year that the property values go up, sometimes they go down, and it has happened where they've gone down and there hasn't been an increment to contribute to the trust fund. But in the years where property values go up within the redevelopment area, that difference between the value in the baseline year and the value in the subsequent years is contributed to the trust fund, creating a fund based on the growth in that specific geographic area that can be reinvested back into that area. That reinvestment in turn the intent is for that redevelopment to generate additional property value increases so that you have this fund that based on the benefit that the properties receive within that geographic area, they can continue to build on those benefits and create a situation where every property within that geographic area is benefited from the investment in the individual properties. And I don't know if that cleared things up. It's kind of a complicated system.
It's taxpayer money.
It is taxpayer money. It's property tax money from that geographic area that's set aside for reinvestment in that geographic area. It is the property taxes that are paid by those properties that's reinvested in that area. It's not money from, in the instance of the 1792 CRA, it's not money that comes from the Oviedo area or from other areas of the county that are not located within that area. It is specific to the area that is benefiting from that increment. So it's intended to be a way to lift up all of the properties in that area by reinvestment in that area without putting a drain on other areas of the county.
So,
The county attorney wanted to add a comment.
Just to maybe sum up, simply put, the money that is raised in the TIF cannot be spent. It's a violation of Florida law if the money is spent outside the CRA, period.
so the money's paid in by the people that own the land in the CRA and can only be applied for by the people in the CRA.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's one fact that hasn't been stated here this morning, apparently. As far as the comment that was made about how do we know that they're going to actually build a building, that's been addressed in this agreement. Ms. Guillet, could you speak to what the terms of the payment would be?
Yes, ma'am. The agreement, if the board approves the grant agreement, the recommended payout schedule, it's kind of a two-tiered payout schedule. There are two requests here. There's a request for funding for the demolition of the buildings that were on the site at the Flea World property. And then there's a second request. The second part of that request is funding to install the infrastructure for water and sewer service. And the staff's recommendation is approval of the demolition portion. And for the demolition portion, we're recommending, because we think that the elimination of that blight could be looked at as a standalone redevelopment activity. There are a number of different activities that can be funded under the CRA grant program. And we believe, on a staff standpoint, that elimination of blight could be looked at as a discrete project. And under the grant program, those discrete redevelopment projects are eligible for 20% of the total cost. So the recommendation for the payout is 20% of the cost for the demolition portion be paid out up front, just like any other redevelopment project that would be eligible for 20%. This is a unique project because there is a bigger element to it, a bigger overall project that proposes to involve $141 million of capital investment on this site. It is correct, and someone made the statement earlier, that there is no imminent construction of any of that redevelopment activity. So staff has recommended, if the board wants to fund, number one, the remaining 80% of the demolition costs and the entirety of the infrastructure costs, that be tied to the development activity that occur on site. So development activity would have to occur before any additional payouts over that 20% of the demolition costs. It would have to be tied to a certain amount of taxable value would have to be constructed on the site before the applicant would be eligible to take down a commensurate portion of the grant award. So there is a protection built in the contract, the grant agreement contract, that would ensure that in order for the applicant to receive any of the benefit of the grant money, they have to actually construct a portion of the project so that a benefit returns to the corridor and the rest of the community, and that benefit being in increased taxable value to the property and the potential for also additional jobs in the corridor.
And that applies to option 1 or 2?
That would apply either for the funding of the demolition or the funding of the demolition and the infrastructure after the first 20% of the demolition, which they're eligible for under the terms of the grant program.
Chairman, just to clarify, when I was there when the CRA was voted, I was one of the 2 no votes. Well, I was brought up.
The meeting is up here with the Board of County Commissioners. Is that what it is?
Unless you have other questions or would like me to
Okay.
explain
I just
further.
wanted to clarify to set the record straight, because people come up here and they make comments that are not accurate, and people take it as the gospel, and that's not the case here.
As do
So,
And it is a very complicated grant application, and we've spent a lot of time on it because we want to make sure that any grant that is moved forward is tied to a benefit that returns to the community. And so that's why we have an unusual proposed payout schedule. It's to ensure that a benefit is returned to the community before the additional grant funds are distributed. They may, if the project doesn't develop, the additional grant funds would never be distributed. The applicant would never get the benefit of those grant funds. So it's directly tied to reinvestment in the property, which is reinvestment in the corridor.
well, Mr. Chairman, as the RPA representative, you know that they voted unanimously, which is the RPA for the benefit of the public is made up of representatives from Castleberry, Winter Springs, Lake Mary, Sanford, and the county. I am the RPA representative appointed by the chairman. And it was a unanimous decision to grant the $1.3 million to include the demolition and the utilities. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the board. My position's been well-known on this, as I represented the RPA vote.
Okay. Do we have any other comments? Board members? Apparently, we have no other comments from the board. Okay. With that, I'll take up a motion, if anybody has a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the redevelopment and construction grant for the, actually, I'm going to take this up in 2 motions. if you
Okay.
can. I would like to move approval for the redevelopment grant construction of the 1792 Five Points LLC in the amount of $740,000 for demolition needed in preparation of redevelopment of the former Flea World, and adopt a resolution implementing the associated contract and budget amendment request 17-009, appropriating funds for the U.S. 1792 CRA.
So the motion has been made for the $740,000.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded for the $740,000 demolition. Is there any further discussion with?
I have one more question for staff. How many other 181-acre developments do you foresee coming into to request funds in the 1792 corridor? And just for the benefit of the public as well, this board has already had a workshop and discussion and directed staff that it is our intent for the 1792 CRA to expire, and the funds would go back to the cities who have been contributors to that. So that decision's already been made. So,
Well, we're not accepting applications for grants.
So we're not
moving forward.
accepting any more applications for
We're not accepting any more
grants?
applications for grants based on the direction, the consensus of the board at the work session.
and no other, we have, I think, one other potential, what we call.
We might have 1 or 2 in
Large.
in the hopper, but none of them are of this magnitude.
No,
We have
I'm-
one that may potentially come before you, but it's a small grant request.
But the other only large one that we are looking at potentially had been High Life,
Yes.
that property down in Castleberry.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion with regard to the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the county manager, with this project, since your recommendation is to approve this, your staff, what's the increase in taxable value that potentially could happen?
I don't know that we have that in the staff report. We did. Tricia, do you have that analysis?
I'm sorry, the increase in taxable value on the property?
Correct.
Let me look in the notes.
David Johnson, the property appraiser, did do a quick estimate on that, and I don't think I have it in my notes here, but Tricia may have it in hers.
Yes, I believe it's in the application. Sorry.
And as she's looking that up, I'd like to ask the county manager a subsequent question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and that would be, we're treating this just like every other project. The only difference is that we're putting tighter restrictions on it based on the size, correct? And the payout.
That's correct. You have a grant program that
But
has...
we're looking at this just like every other project.
To a certain extent, yes. And I think, in fact, you've been a little... The grant program is set up so that redevelopment applicants can request 20% of the project costs. This, of course, we're talking about a potential investment of $141 million in capital investment in the site. So
Which is not the norm.
Which is certainly not the norm. So it's not the normal project, and the request, even at the maximum request that the applicant has pursued, is under that 20% threshold for projects. We have funded a number of projects, as you're aware, much smaller projects, small mom and pop type businesses, much smaller redevelopment activities. And this fund has made some of those redevelopment, and in fact, many of those redevelopment activities possible. They wouldn't have been possible, and those property owners wouldn't have had the ability to redevelop their properties had the CRA funds not been available to them. So it's consistent in the sense that it serves the same purpose as the other grants that we've brought before you, the grant requests. And it is, the eligibility of up to 20% has been the maximum, there was one exception to that. But as a rule, you've awarded not more than 20%, and as we see, the anticipated capital investment on this project is $141 million. So it's different in the payout structure because this is a longer-term project than the ones you normally see. You normally see projects on a much smaller level. So I'm stretching for you, Tricia, so I hope you found this.
I'm sorry. I do have that information when you're ready.
But it is been treated just like any other grant project, except that you actually have a more restrictive payout program than you have on other projects.
This is also one of only a couple of catalyst projects that we, potentially in this corridor.
This has been identified in the redevelopment plan as a catalyst site.
And to answer your question, Commissioner, the value of property will increase from $9,175,401 to $141,410,800 based on the property appraiser's analysis. The proposed project will provide a minimum increase of almost $2 million in property taxes annually.
Mr. Chairman, clarification to that
Yes,
statement.
Commissioner Henley.
Was that based upon the proposed building being built or simply the increased value of the property as it sits right now?
That's based on the redevelopment of the property as contemplated by the Reagan Center redevelopment plan.
That's based on full build-out.
Yes, well, that was my understanding. I didn't want to get the impression that the value of the property had increased that much already when only demolition has gone on out there.
Correct.
And that's one of the reasons why staff recommend a tiered approach for the payout, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. That's why the payout does not occur under either option until there's verticality, until the development actually occurs.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Constantine.
I think that, this has been an exercise in some cases trying to make sure that you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And the fact of the matter is that I think a lot of people today look at tax incentives like growth incentives, as many indicated, as corporate welfare. And in many cases, I agree with them. As Mr. Levitt knows, and I've given it to him, that I've From the moment that I came here, I questioned a number of the job incentives and actually put together a 10-point program of which the staff now answers those questions each and every time a job incentive program comes forth. But I want to be careful to recognize the difference between a tax incentive growth, job growth program, which, if you're not careful, could be corporate welfare, and a catalyst project and program that's looking to invest in redevelopment. Now, in 1997, if I was here, and none of you were here, I believe, our clerk was here and voted against it. I wanted to reiterate that for him, and I probably would have voted against this 13-mile snake CRA also. I do believe in CRAs, but I believe in CRAs should be very compact and have a specific purpose, like the one that I supported when I was a city commissioner of Altamont Springs and did the CRA for downtown, which created Crane's Roost and brought in investments and opportunities. This, although ambitious, was just far too unwieldy. And although we've given investments all the way from Sanford all the way down to Castleberry on this investment, 1792 has not improved the way I think we all would like. And this commission has recognized that. First, they started pushing, as I have always suggested, and they have now, they also suggest infrastructure on tax increment when you're dealing with CRAs and you're dealing with tax increment financing. These dollars were generated by the businesses and the properties along 1792. We have all agreed that we would not renew and that we would close out this CRA. But what we're dealing with today is what exists and what that CRA was intended to do. Now, the investment, the developer has asked for $2.327 million. Previously, there were motions and discussions and approvals, as Commissioner Carey indicated, by the CRA committee for $1.38 million. This commission has looked at it very carefully and sent the staff back to renegotiate and work through pushing infrastructure. To get this property prepared for development as part of the CRA, the only thing that I could ever imagine would be infrastructure would be the demolition cleanup. I believe that price was $950,000. Is that not correct? That was
Originally, yes.
So we're looking at $740,000, and because of this, and I think that many of us are here today because of the size of this project. This is a major catalyst project that, if successful, would help recreate a great deal of opportunities along the 1792 corridor. I am not for the 2.3 and never have been. I am not and have never been supportive of the 1.38 million. I believe that the staff has come up with a reasonable recommendation of putting in a certain amount of money now and then in increments as this development continues. I believe that we have all struggled with this. And frankly, other programs would have gotten, if the size were proportional, would have gotten a lot, this would have gotten a lot more based upon what we have given to other projects. But we have looked at this one very carefully. We have looked at this, the size and the scope, and we recognize that this is not one that we should be paying as we would the others in the basic 20% that we had talked about before. So in essence, we're really looking at less than 10% from a standpoint of what we would have normally given, and about 30% of what the original, less than 30% of what the original request was for. And so today, therefore, I believe that it is incumbent upon us to stick with the basic rules and premise that we have done on this, get rid of the CRA as we move forward, and we've all agreed, as I said before, to do that, and then find ways and discussion of coming up with more concise opportunities, if we will, if we did want to go back and do something with the tax increment financing in the 1792 area. But that is not even under discussion for the future right now, but that would be the only way that I think in the future could be successful. So I'm going to support this motion today, and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here today and voicing your concern. But I want you again to understand, this is not the same as a job incentive and growth program. This is not what people had indicated as corporate welfare. This is a redevelopment project opportunity for all of 1792 and all of the county.
Thank you, Commissioner Constantine. Any further comments? Okay. Any further discussion with regard to this item? Call a vote on the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries 4-1.
Mr. Chairman, since the RPA Board recommended the award of the total amount of $1.38 million, I will go ahead and put a motion out there for the balance, the $640,000 for the utility connections. And again, the payout has been arranged if the board decides to support that. Similar to the other, no payment will be made until the vertical construction goes forth and the investment has already been made. And I just feel like that's my responsibility, since the RPA unanimously supported this item because of the importance of a catalyst project of this size.
Is there a second? Okay. Motion fails for lack of a second.
All right.
Okay. At this time, we'll take a 5-minute break.